You've made it to section 2 of the course. We completed our deep dive into phishing campaigns. Now we're shifting to a different but related attack vector, credential stuffing. While phishing tricks you into giving up your credentials, credential stuffing exploits credentials you've already lost, often without even knowing it. This section is about how attackers turn the massive data breaches you hear about in the news into direct attacks against you. We're going to cover the economics of stolen credentials and why they remain valuable long after the breach occurs. Let's start with a fundamental question. What happens to your data after a company gets breached? When a website or service is compromised and user data is stolen, that data doesn't just disappear. It enters a vast underground economy where stolen credentials are bought, sold, and traded like commodities. There are entire marketplaces on the dark web dedicated to selling breach data. These operate like legitimate e-commerce platforms, with product listings, customer reviews, escrow services, and customer support. The only difference is the product being sold is stolen information. Not all breaches are equal in terms of what data they expose. Some breaches expose usernames and plain text passwords. These are the most valuable because their credentials are immediately usable. Other breaches expose hashed passwords, which require cracking but still have significant value. Many breaches also include email addresses, phone numbers, physical addresses, dates of birth, security question answers, and sometimes payment information. The most valuable breaches involve financial institutions, cryptocurrency exchanges, email providers, and corporate networks. Anywhere access has direct monetary value or provides leverage for further attacks. But even breaches of seemingly low-value sites matter because of password reuse. Your credentials from a compromised gaming forum might unlock your email account if you used the same password. Understanding the stolen credential economy requires understanding its structure. At the top are the initial hackers who breach systems and extract data. These actors might keep the data for their own use, but often they sell it to maximize profit. Next are aggregators and data brokers who buy data from multiple breaches, combine it, remove duplicates, and organize it into searchable databases. They add value by making the data more useful and accessible. Then there are the retailers who purchase from aggregators and resell to end users in smaller, more targeted packages. They might specialize in credentials for specific industries, geographic regions, or account types. Finally, there are end users who purchase credentials for specific attacks, credential stuffing campaigns, account takeover fraud, identity theft, or targeted intrusions. Each layer in this supply chain takes a cut, but the overall market remains profitable because the data can be sold repeatedly. Unlike physical goods, stolen data isn't consumed when used. Stolen credentials have market prices based on their value and freshness. Fresh credentials from a recent breach command premium prices. Bank account credentials might sell for $50 to $500, depending on the account balance and verification status. Cryptocurrency exchange credentials can sell for even more. Corporate VPN credentials for major organizations can sell for thousands of dollars. Older breach data is cheaper but still valuable. Massive compilations of billions of credentials from multiple old breaches sell for relatively small amounts, sometimes just hundreds of dollars for billions of records. Email account credentials sell for $10 to $100 depending on the provider and whether the account is verified as active. Social media accounts sell for $5 to $50. Streaming service accounts sell for $1 to $10. The prices reflect the potential value to attackers. If credentials provide access to money, they're expensive. If they provide access to additional attack vectors, they're moderately priced. If they're primarily useful for spam or minor fraud, they're cheap. So a lot of people don't realize that a breach from 5 or 10 years ago still puts you at risk today, because most people never really changed their passwords after those breaches. Either they didn't know their data was compromised, or they didn't understand the implications, or they simply didn't bother. Research shows that passwords remain valid for years. Even when people do change passwords, they often change them to similar variations. Password 123 becomes password 124, which attackers can easily guess through password mutation techniques. This means credentials stolen in the massive LinkedIn breach of 2012, the Yahoo breach of 2013, the Adobe breach of 2013, or any of hundreds of other breaches that are still being successfully accomplished, these passwords are still being successfully used today for credential stuffing attacks. Attackers don't necessarily care if the breach is old. They care if their credentials work. And surprisingly often, they do. The most valuable assets in the stolen credential economy are massive compilation databases that aggregate data from hundreds or thousands of breaches. These databases contain billions of email password combinations, organized for efficient searching and testing. Names like collection number 1 through collection number 5 circulated widely, containing nearly 3 billion unique email password pairs. More recent compilations continue to emerge, each combining newly breached data with historical data. The largest known compilation database contains over 10 billion credentials. These databases are the ammunition for credential stuffing attacks. With billions of credentials available, attackers can test them against any target at scale. Raw breach data has limited value until it's verified and enhanced. Attackers use automated tools to verify which credentials are still valid. They test credentials against the original service or similar services to confirm the account exists and is active. They enhance the data by adding additional information gathered from other sources, linking email addresses to social media profiles, identifying high-value targets based on job titles or affiliations, or correlating data across multiple breaches to build comprehensive profiles. This verification and enhancement process transforms raw stolen data into actionable intelligence for attacks. Just as there's an economy for stolen credentials, there's an ecosystem of tools for exploiting them. Credential stuffing tools automate the process of testing credentials across multiple sites. These tools handle authentication protocols, CAPTCHA solving, proxy rotation, and result tracking. They're designed to test millions of credentials efficiently. Popular tools like Sentry MBA, Storm, and others are available on underground forums, often for free or minimal cost. They come with pre-configured modules for testing credentials against thousands of popular websites. This tool ecosystem has lowered the barrier to entry for credential stuffing attacks. Anyone with basic technical skills can download tools and stolen credential databases and launch attacks. Credential stuffing is profitable even with low success rates. Typical credential stuffing campaigns achieve 0.1% to 2% success rates, meaning that out of 1 million credential pairs tested, 1,000 to 20,000 will successfully log into accounts. It might sound like a low success rate, but when you're testing billions of credentials, even 0.1% represents millions of compromised accounts. And since the credentials are cheap or free and the tools are automated, the return on investment is excellent. An attacker might spend $500 on credentials and a few days of automated testing, then compromise thousands of accounts that can be monetized for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's a relevant observation from the computer scientist and security expert Peter G. Newman in his book Computer-Related Risks. He wrote, "The weakest link in security is almost always the human element. The strongest encryption and most sophisticated firewalls are useless if a user employs a weak password or uses the same password across multiple systems." Newman identified the core vulnerability that credential stuffing exploits. It's not sophisticated hacking, it's not breaching encryption, it's simply exploiting the human tendency to reuse passwords across multiple accounts. The billions of dollars invested in corporate security infrastructure, the advanced authentication protocols, the security certifications, and compliance frameworks, all of it can be bypassed because users choose convenience over security and use the same password everywhere. So once again, it's not a technology problem, it's a human behavior problem. Until user behavior changes at scale, credential stuffing will remain highly effective. When a major breach is announced publicly, there's typically a rush of exploitation activity. Attackers know that companies will force password resets, and users will hopefully change their passwords. They have a limited window to exploit the breach before remediation occurs. So immediately after a breach announcement, there's a spike in credential stuffing attacks using that breach data. But even after that initial wave, the data remains valuable. Not everyone changes their password. Not everyone even knows they were affected. And password reuse means credentials from one breach can compromise accounts on entirely different services. Another uncomfortable reality is that not all breaches are publicly disclosed. Some breaches are never detected by the compromised organization. Some are detected but not disclosed publicly due to concerns about reputation damage, legal liability, or regulatory requirements. Some are disclosed only to regulatory authorities but not to affected users. This means you might have accounts that were compromised in undisclosed breaches. Your credentials might be circulating in criminal marketplaces without you having any idea you need to change your password. This information asymmetry benefits attackers and harms users. Attackers know about breaches, disclosed and undisclosed, because they're buying and selling the stolen data. Users only know about publicized breaches. Individual breaches might seem manageable, but the aggregation of hundreds of breaches creates an overwhelming problem. Most people have dozens or hundreds of online accounts accumulated over years. Each one is a potential breach risk. Even if you practice good password hygiene now, what about accounts you created 10 years ago and forgot about? Those forgotten accounts still exist. Their credentials still work. And if any of those old services suffered a breach, those credentials are now in attacker databases. The sheer volume of breach data, billions of compromised credentials from thousands of breaches, makes the problem nearly unmanageable through individual vigilance alone. The stolen credential economy is enabled by cryptocurrency and anonymous payment systems. Cryptocurrency allows attackers to monetize compromised accounts and sell stolen data without revealing their identity or location. Traditional financial systems have anti-money laundering controls and identity verification requirements that would make this underground economy far more difficult to operate. Anonymous payment systems also facilitate the purchase of credential databases and tools without leaving traceable financial records. This financial infrastructure is critical to understanding why the stolen credential economy thrives. It's not just about the technical ability to breach systems and stuff credentials. It's about the ability to profit from those activities while remaining anonymous. For individuals, the credential stuffing threat is pervasive and largely invisible. You might never know that attackers tested your credentials against 100 different services. You might only discover the compromise if you happen to notice suspicious activity, if the attacker makes an obvious mistake, or if the compromised service has good detection and notifies you of unusual access. Many credential stuffing compromises go undetected for months or years. The attacker maintains quiet access, periodically checking the account for valuable information or waiting for an opportunity to monetize it. For organizations, credential stuffing creates multiple problems. They face fraudulent transactions and account takeovers that create financial losses and customer service costs. They face liability for failing to protect user accounts. They face reputational damage when compromises become public. They invest in detection systems, rate limiting, CAPTCHA challenges, and multi-factor authentication, all to combat an attack that fundamentally exploits user behavior rather than organizational security flaws. Organizations can't prevent users from reusing passwords. They can enforce policies on their own service, but they can't control what passwords users choose on other services. Understanding the economics of stolen credentials should change your approach to passwords. First, assume any service you use has been or will be breached. This is not pessimism, it's realism based on the frequency of breaches. Second, understand that your credentials have monetary value to criminals. You're not just a random person, you're a potential source of profit. Third, recognize that old breaches remain relevant. Just because a breach happened years ago doesn't mean you're safe if you never changed that password, or if you only barely changed it by putting something extra at the end or changing the last couple digits. Fourth, accept that you cannot manually track every breach that might affect you. You need systematic approaches like password managers, multi-factor authentication, rather than relying on memory and news coverage. The next lesson will explore further the specific vulnerability that makes credential stuffing possible, and how attackers leverage your password habits to turn a single breach into access to your entire digital life.